My name is Evelyn Carter. And I never thought at 65 years old I'd be standing in my garage holding 3 little foil packets that would shatter everything I believed about my marriage. Seattle summers aren't like the ones back east. The air is cool, the sky heavy with clouds even in July, and the smell of salt water drifts in from the Puget Sound. That morning felt ordinary. I had just finished watering the hydrangeas that line our porch when I remembered Robert hadn't taken his blood pressure pill. After 35 years of marriage, reminding him of those tiny white pills had become second nature. He was out in the driveway, fussing with his vintage Ford Torino, the car he loved more than his own brother, and I thought it slipped the pill into his pocket before he left for one of his endless committee meetings. When I opened the driver's door, a rush of leather and engine oil hit me. I leaned across the seat toward the glove compartment. Robert always complained it stuck, and I thought it'd give it a good tug. It popped open too easily. Inside were the usual scraps of napkins and old maps. But then 3 square packages slid out, shiny in the dim light. 3 condoms. My hands froze. My mind refused to believe what my eyes saw. Robert and I hadn't needed protection since our son Caleb was born. After complications, the doctor had made sure of that. Robert was almost 70. What business did he have carrying condoms? And why would he hide them here? In his sacred car, I picked them up. One by one, the foil crinkling in my palm like it was laughing at me. That's when I noticed something else on the passenger headrest was a faint smear of lipstick, a shade of red I'd never owned in my life. The garage felt suddenly too quiet, too still. The air pressed down on me, thick as fog rolling off Lake Union. I sank into the driver's seat, staring at those packets as if they might rearrange themselves into something innocent, something logical. But there was no innocent explanation. Not after the late-night phone calls he always took outside. Not after the sudden interest in new colognes. Not after the unexplained Saturday errands that left me alone on the back porch, watching hummingbirds fight over the feeder by myself. In that moment, 35 years of marriage replayed in my head like a cruel slideshow. The day we moved into our modest house near Green Lake. The nights we hosted church potlucks. The trips to the Oregon coast where Robert held my hand in the surf. Had it all been a lie? Or had he changed somewhere along the way? And I'd been too trusting to see it? I closed the glove compartment slowly, slid the condoms into my pocket, and stepped back out into the cool Seattle air. From the porch, I could see Robert in the backyard, waving to our neighbor as if nothing in the world was wrong. My lips pressed into a thin line. That was the moment I decided I would not scream. I would not cry. And I would not confront him yet. Instead, I would wait. I would plan. And when the truth came out, it would not be whispered behind closed doors. It would be heard by everyone. The rest of that day, I moved through the house like a ghost. Robert came in later, smelling of motor oil and that new cologne I hadn't bought. He kissed my cheek out of habit, the same way he had for decades. But I felt it differently now. His lips might as well have been a stranger's. As I stirred a pot of chicken soup, my mind played a cruel game, flashing back to all the little cracks I had ignored. The late nights when he claimed he was at the senior board meetings downtown. The sudden insistence on keeping his phone with him at all times. Even in the bathroom. The way he had begun shaving more carefully, spritzing himself with expensive cologne before errands that were supposed to be as simple as picking up fishing gear or checking the community center's roof leak. I used to laugh it off. Men get quirky as they age. I'd tell my sister, Patricia, on the phone. At least mine stays busy. But deep down, it felt the distance growing, like moss creeping silently across a stone, until one day the stone is unrecognizable. That evening, over dinner, Robert looked across the table and smiled like nothing was wrong. "You know," he said, stabbing a piece of bread with his knife. "Our anniversary is coming up. 35 years. We ought to celebrate it big this time. Rent the community hall. Invite friends. Maybe even get Caleb to fly up from San Diego. My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. Celebrate. My chest tightened. Half with irony. Half with fury. He wanted to put on a show of devotion while hiding 3 condoms in his glove compartment. It was almost laughable. Almost. I forced a smile. That sounds nice, I said, pretending my stomach wasn't churning. 35 years is quite a milestone. Inside, I thought, 35 years of me carrying this marriage, patching every crack, pretending not to see the leaks. 35 years of loyalty that he was ready to trade for a smear of red lipstick. After dinner, while Robert settled into his recliner with the evening paper, I slipped onto the porch swing. The air smelled of damp cedar and rain clouds. A neighbor's wind chimes clinked in the breeze. I pressed my palms together, trying to stop the tremor in my fingers. I wasn't just betrayed. I was angry at myself. Angry for ignoring what was right in front of me. Then something happened that sealed my resolve. Robert's phone buzzed on the counter. Head gone to the bathroom, leaving it behind a rare mistake. The screen lit up with a single message. Keep Portland between us. Same plan. Same time. My pulse thudded in my ears. Portland. So it wasn't just dinner dates. It was travel. Secrecy. A plan that didn't include me. I put the phone back exactly as it was before he returned, smiling politely when he asked if I wanted to watch a Mariners game with him. My voice came out calm, steady. Not tonight. I think it'll turn in early. But upstairs, in the quiet of our bedroom, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, turning slowly above me. One thought echoed in my mind. This wasn't just infidelity. This was preparation. Escape. And if Robert was preparing to leave me in the shadows, then I would be the one holding the spotlight. The next morning, I woke with a decision heavy in my chest. Crying into my pillow wasn't going to give me answers. I needed proof. Something undeniable that would strip away Robert's carefully polished mask. That afternoon, I called my niece Nora. She was 30, brilliant with computers, and worked for a software firm downtown. Aunt Evelyn, she said, surprised to hear from me midweek. Is everything okay? I hesitated, the words thick in my throat. Finally, I whispered, I think your uncle is hiding something. I need help. Nora didn't laugh or brush me off. Instead, she drove over that evening with a small black case in her hands. This is legal to own, she assured me, opening it to reveal a palm-sized camera. You just need to make sure you're monitoring your own property. If you want to install it in his car, you're within your rights. Her calmness steadied me. We slipped out to the garage together. The Ford Torino sat gleaming. Robert's pride and joy. My hands shook as Nora affixed the camera beneath the dashboard, its lens angled toward the driver's seat. It'll sync to this app, she explained, handing me an old tablet. You'll see everything. That night, lying in bed beside Robert's steady snores, I stared at the screen. The feed showed only darkness. The quiet interior of the car. I felt like a woman stepping into someone else's life. Someone colder, sharper. 2 days later, the footage gave me my first answer. Robert slid into the driver's seat at 9 a.m., whistling, but he wasn't alone for long. At a parking lot near Cary Park, he picked up a woman. She was tall, elegant, with cropped blonde hair and a pearl necklace that gleamed in the morning light. She looked closer to my age than some young fling, but her movements were confident, practiced. I gripped the tablet so hard, my knuckles turned white as the camera caught her leaning in, not for a kiss, but to hand Robert a thick manila envelope. He tucked it quickly under the seat, glancing around before pulling away. My breath caught. This wasn't romance. This was a transaction. The video continued. They drove to Ballard, stopping at a small brick apartment building. Robert carried the envelope inside, while the woman followed, keys already in her hand as if she belonged there. I watched in silence, a storm brewing in my chest. For days, I'd prepared myself to see Robert with another woman's lipstick smeared across his mouth, her hand on his thigh. But this was something deeper. A secret apartment. Envelopes. Keys. That evening, when Robert returned home whistling the same tune, I ladled soup into his bowl as if nothing had changed. But inside, my thoughts were racing. Who was she? What was in that envelope? And why did my husband of 35 years look more alive with her in a dingy Ballard apartment than he had with me in our own home for years? I set down my spoon and smiled across the table, my mask firmly in place. Let him believe I was still blind. Because soon, very soon, he would learn how dangerous it is to underestimate me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time Robert left the house, I found myself staring at that tablet, watching him live a life I knew nothing about. I had pieces of the puzzle, the woman, the apartment, the envelope, but I needed the whole picture. That's when I remembered Mateo Rios. Years ago, when I worked as a librarian, one of my regular patrons had mentioned her cousin was a private investigator down in Tacoma. A good one. I dug through my old address book, fingers trembling as I found the number. Rios Investigations. A deep voice answered. My name is Evelyn Carter, I said, my voice cracking despite my effort to sound firm. I think my husband is hiding more than an affair. I need the truth. We met the next day in his small office above a pawn shop. Mateo was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I laid out everything. The condoms, the lipstick, the camera footage, the mysterious woman. He listened without interrupting, jotting notes in a leather-bound pad. This isn't just infidelity, he said finally. From what you're describing, envelopes, secret apartments, possible cash transfers, it smells like financial fraud. How far do you want me to go? Mrs. Carter? I swallowed hard. All the way. I want proof. Photos. Documents. Anything he can't deny? 3 days later, Mateo called. You'd better come in. On his desk lay a spread of photographs. Robert entering the brick apartment with the woman. Robert carrying grocery bags. Robert meeting her outside a downtown bank. And then my stomach flipped. Robert at a travel agency, holding 2 passports. Her name is Lauren Pierce, Mateo said. 58. Works as a fundraising consultant for several nonprofits. Divorced. No kids. And yes, your husband has been transferring money. Small amounts. A few thousand at a time, into a separate account under an alias. Over the past 18 months, it adds up to about $100,000. I stared at the figures on Mateo's printout. 100,000. Our retirement savings. Drained quietly while I clipped coupons and stretched casseroles to last 2 nights. There's more, he continued. Pierce herself is on the radar. There are whispers of fraudulent charities. Money laundering. Nothing solid yet, but enough to raise red flags. If your husband is tied to her, he's standing on thin ice. The room spun. Betrayal was one thing, but betrayal wrapped in crime. With our future on the line, that was something else entirely. Mateo leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, you need to be careful. Men like your husband, when they feel cornered, they don't always act rationally. I nodded, clutching the photos to my chest. Don't worry, I said quietly. I've lived in his shadow for 35 years. I know how to move without being seen. But this time, when the light comes, hell be the one exposed. Walking back to my car through the damp Seattle streets, I felt the drizzle soak my hair, cold against my skin. My marriage wasn't just breaking. It was unraveling into something darker. And I was done pretending not to notice. When Robert suggested a grand celebration for our 35th anniversary, I almost laughed out loud. He thought he was orchestrating a performance of devotion, parading me around like the faithful wife while he carried on his second life. He had no idea that I intended to make that very stage his downfall. I agreed sweetly, even kissed his cheek. "That's a wonderful idea, Robert," I said. Inside, my mind raced. If he wanted a party, then I'd give him one head never forget. That night, I spread Mateo's photos across my dining table. Robert and Lauren walking into the Ballard apartment. Robert withdrawing cash. Robert holding 2 passports at the travel agency. My hands shook, but not from fear anymore, from focus. These would be the centerpiece of my plan. I called Marjorie, my oldest friend from church. "Marge, I need a favor," I said in my brightest voice. "Robert and I are celebrating 35 years, and I'd love your help with the party." She squealed. "Of course. Oh, Evelyn. This is going to be beautiful. The Carters. 35 years, people will be so inspired." Inspired. Yes. That was the word Robert loved to hear about himself. Head soak it up until the very moment the mask came off. While Marjorie and the ladies fussed over decorations, I quietly took care of the real work. Mateo helped me enlarge the photos into poster size. I labeled each one in bold red letters: Ballard Apartment, Secret Bank Withdrawals, Travel Agency. He also provided me with a neat folder of financial records and emails between Robert and Lauren, undeniable evidence. Then came the message. It slipped under my front door in an unmarked envelope. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." My heart stuttered. The letters were typed, clipped from some cheap printer. No signature. My first thought was Robert, but he wasn't clever enough to do this without drawing attention. More likely, it came from Lauren. For a moment, fear threatened to paralyze me. But then I pictured Robert's smug smile, his hand on Lauren's back as they entered that apartment. I burned the note in the fireplace and whispered to the flames, "I don't scare easy." I began staging subtle distractions at home. I slipped a mild digestive tonic into Robert's evening whiskey, nothing dangerous. Just enough to unsettle his stomach over the coming days. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about stripping away his composure, making sure that when the truth dropped, he wouldn't have the strength to bluff. Each night, lying beside him, I rehearsed my words. Calm, precise. The tone of a woman who had spent 35 years listening, serving, smiling, and was finally ready to speak. When Robert beamed across the dinner table and said, "Everyone will be there. Even Caleb's flying up." I nodded gently. He saw a wife preparing to honor him. What he didn't see was the trap closing. One ribbon, one flower, one photograph at a time. The date was set. The invitations were sent. The masks were polished. And I, Evelyn Carter, was ready to be the one who tore them all away. At the evening of our 35th anniversary arrived, draped in fairy lights and polished lies. The community hall in our Seattle neighborhood had never looked so fine. White linen on the tables, vases of lilies, candles flickering like tiny secrets. From the outside, it looked like a celebration of a love that had endured decades. On the inside, it was the stage for Robert's reckoning. Guests streamed in, smiling warmly at me. "Evelyn, you look radiant. 35 years. "What an inspiration," I nodded graciously, thanking them, even as my hands trembled inside my satin gloves. No one could see the evidence hidden behind the drapes at the back of the hall. Robert arrived in a navy suit, polished shoes gleaming, his hair slicked back with too much pomade. He clasped my hand, leaned in, and whispered through his teeth, "You did well. Darling, this is exactly the kind of attention we deserve. We. The word landed like a stone in my chest. But I smiled and kissed his cheek, as if nothing burned beneath my skin. The pastor from our church opened the night with a blessing, his voice echoing under the vaulted ceiling. Robert and Evelyn Carter, 35 years of devotion, faith, and loyalty. A beacon for our community. I caught the irony like a knife between my ribs. Devotion. Loyalty. My gaze shifted to Robert, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sweat gathered at his temples. The digestive tonic had begun to do its quiet work, tightening the mask he tried so hard to hold in place. From across the room, I saw Caleb, our son, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. He had flown in from San Diego that morning. His eyes searched my face. Curious. Suspicious. He knew me well enough to sense something stirring beneath my calm smile. The slideshow began. A parade of memories. Robert and me on our wedding day. Him lifting Caleb onto his shoulders at the beach. Our first home with the peeling blue shutters. Guests sighed, clapped, even dabbed their eyes. Robert grinned wide, soaking in the praise. But his hand twitched against his thigh, restless. When the music softened, Marjorie took the microphone. And now, let us hear from the man of the hour, Robert Carter, devoted husband, father, and friend. Applause thundered. Robert rose, adjusted his tie, and walked toward the podium. His gait was proud, but I noticed the slight hunch of his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched. I stepped forward. Before Robert speaks, I said, my voice ringing clear through the hall. I'd like to say a few words. The crowd turned toward me. Robert froze mid-step, his eyes narrowing. He hadn't planned for this. I moved toward the covered easel at the back of the stage, each step deliberate. My pulse hammered in my ears, but my voice stayed calm, steady. 35 years. I began, is a long time. Long enough to build a life. Long enough to know the difference between truth and lies. The hall grew silent, the kind of silence that thickens the air, as if even the walls leaned in. Robert's face paled. He glanced toward the exit, but Caleb blocked his line of sight. His eyes locked on his father. I rested my hand on the cloth draped over the easel. My fingers curled around the edge. The truth was seconds away from tearing free. I took a deep breath, lifted the cloth, and let it fall to the floor. Gasps rippled through the hall. On the easel stood a board covered with photos. Robert slipping into the Ballard apartment with Lauren. Robert withdrawing stacks of cash. Robert at the travel agency clutching 2 passports. Beneath the photos, pinned in neat rows, were copies of bank transfers and receipts. And taped in the center, 3 small foil packets, gleaming under the stage lights. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The silence was deafening. This, I said clearly, is the truth about my 35 years of marriage. The truth about the man you call loyal, devoted, faithful. All eyes turned to Robert. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His face flushed red, then drained white. From the front row, Caleb's voice broke the silence. "Dad, is this real?" Robert stammered. "Evelyn, this is a mistake. A setup." "A setup?" I cut him off, my voice rising like a tide. "Do you think I planted you in that apartment? Robert, do you think I faked your signature on the transfers? Do you think I invented her?" I jabbed a finger toward the largest photo, Robert holding the door open for Lauren, her hand resting possessively on his arm. The crowd murmured, whispers hissing like snakes. Robert's eyes darted from face to face, searching for sympathy, for an ally. None came. Even Marjorie, who had gushed over him for decades, sat stone-faced, her lips pressed tight. Then I revealed the final piece, pulling a folded paper from my pocket. You planned to leave. Didn't you, Robert? One-way tickets to Vancouver next month. Your name and hers, side by side. While I stood here, celebrating 3.5 decades of lies. The room erupted. People gasped. Hands flew to mouths. Caleb stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You were going to run off? Leave Mom with nothing? His voice cracked. Fury laced with betrayal. Robert stepped forward, sweat pouring down his temples. It's not like that. Son, you don't understand. I understand enough, Caleb snapped, his fists clenched. You've humiliated Mom. You've humiliated all of us. Robert swayed slightly, his composure unraveling. The mild tonic it'd given him earlier now compounded his panic. His stomach churned audibly. His breath came short. He pressed a hand to his midsection, grimacing. I looked him straight in the eye. You spent 35 years thinking I was weak, that I wouldn't see, that I wouldn't act. But here's the truth. I am stronger than you ever imagined. The guests stared in stunned silence. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered to each other, unable to look away. Robert opened his mouth as if to speak, but then doubled over, gripping the podium for balance. His carefully built image of dignity and control shattered before everyone's eyes. And in that moment, for the first time in decades, I felt the weight lift off my chest. The truth was no longer my burden. It was his. The hall erupted into chaos. Some guests stood to leave, unwilling to witness any more, while others leaned forward, hungry for every detail of the scandal unraveling before them. Robert clutched the podium, his knuckles white, sweat dripping down his forehead as he tried to catch his breath. Evelyn, he rasped, his voice hoarse. We can talk about this at home. Not here. Please. I shook my head slowly, my voice carrying through the microphone. No. Robert. You made your choices in secret. Now you can face the truth in public. Caleb stepped up beside me, his jaw tight. You lied to both of us. 35 years. Dad. And you were going to walk away like we were nothing. His voice trembled with anger and hurt. Robert straightened, trying to summon the commanding tone he used to wield at community meetings. This is all exaggerated. Evelyn, you've been misled. Lauren is just a consultant. The transfers are for. The double doors at the back of the hall swung open with a heavy thud. Gasps filled the air as 2 uniformed officers stepped in, flanking Mateo Rios, the investigator who had helped me piece everything together. He strode forward with calm authority, a folder in his hand. Robert Carter, Mateo said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise. You've been identified in an active investigation tied to fraudulent fundraising and unlawful transfers. You'll need to come with us for questioning. Robert's eyes widened in horror. What? This is insane. Evelyn, tell them I'm innocent. I met his gaze without flinching. I already did my talking. Robert, to the right people. The room fell into a tense hush. All eyes followed as the officers moved closer. Robert backed away, shaking his head furiously. You can't do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. His words came out more like a plea than a command. But there was no sympathy left in the room. Neighbors who once praised him now avoided his eyes. Friends he had bragged to for years whispered behind cupped hands. Even Marjorie, who had idolized our marriage, turned her face away. Robert's knees buckled slightly, and he collapsed into a chair. His tie hung loose. His chest heaved, and for the first time in all our years together, he looked small. Not the powerful man he pretended to be, but a frightened, cornered liar. Caleb's voice rang out, sharp and final. Take him. The officers lifted Robert to his feet. He didn't fight. His shoulders sagged. the weight of decades of deception pressing down on him. As they led him out, his eyes met mine one last time, wild, desperate, and utterly defeated. I held my head high, refusing to look away. This wasn't just the end of a party. It was the end of a prison he'd lived in for 35 years. And as the doors closed behind him, the hall seemed to exhale with me. For the first time in a long, long while, I could breathe. It has been a year since that night at the community hall. 1 year since Robert was led away in handcuffs, his legacy crumbling in front of the people he once fooled. At first, the scandal shook Seattle like an earthquake. His name was splashed across local papers, community leader accused of fraud, betrayal exposed at anniversary party. Some neighbors pitied me, others whispered. But eventually, the noise quieted. Life has a way of moving on. Robert took a plea deal. The fraud, the hidden transfers, the Cayman account, all of it caught up to him. Hell, spend the next several years paying back what he can and working under restrictions he never imagined. I hear he lives in a small apartment now, alone. Even Lauren left once the money dried up. Irony has a cruel sense of timing. As for me, I stayed in our house on Maple Lane. It no longer feels like a cage. After repainting the walls, replacing the curtains, and donating the furniture Robert had insisted on, it feels like mine. For the first time in decades, every corner reflects who I am not, the woman I was told to be. Caleb comes by every Sunday. He admitted it took him months to process the truth, to reconcile the father he thought he knew with the man who betrayed us both. But he stood by me. He said, "Mom, you're stronger than both of us ever realized." Hearing that from my son healed a part of me Robert had tried to break. I've also discovered something unexpected: freedom. I joined an art group at the local community center. I started painting landscapes Puget Sound at dusk, Mount Rainier glowing at sunrise. My first painting sold at a local fair. Me, a woman who once thought her only role was wife and caretaker, now has her own small place in the world. Sometimes I walk past the community hall where it all came crashing down. I don't feel shame anymore. I feel pride. That was the night I chose myself. The night I refused to stay silent. To every woman who has ever stared at evidence of betrayal and wondered if she was strong enough to act, listen to me. You are. The pain will feel like it will swallow you whole, but it will not. It will shape you, sharpen you, remind you that your worth does not depend on anyone else's loyalty. I lost a husband. Yes, but I found myself. And that, my friends, is the best revenge of all. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And let me know where you're watching from. If there's one lesson my story can teach, it's this: silence protects the wrong people. For years, I ignored the signs, choosing comfort over confrontation. But betrayal grows in the dark. And when you finally shine a light on it, the truth may shatter walls you thought were unbreakable. What I discovered is that sometimes losing everything you thought you had is the only way to find what you truly need: your own voice, your own peace, your own future. So if you're standing where I once stood, staring at the cracks in a life you built with someone who doesn't value you, remember this: you are worth more than their lies. You are stronger than the fear that keeps you quiet. And when you choose yourself, the world opens up in ways you never imagined. Now, where are you listening from?